Have you ever wondered when exactly Jesus was born, or if it could even be possible to know? Was it perhaps a sign in the heavens which heralded Christ's birth? Could there be a lost messianic prophecy in the Torah that could shed more light on the moment of incarnation? In this video, we will look at multiple verses to help narrow the time frame of Jesus' birth. Add to that, we will discover the sign in the heavens which happened on the exact day of his birth using computer software known as Stellarium. If this seems too good to be true, then you definitely won't believe what comes next. Using the same computer software, we will also show you a sign in the heavens that happened on Mary's conception of Jesus. The unique thing about the sign is it lasts the duration of her pregnancy. And of course, there is a Bible verse to accompany this sign as well. If that still wasn't enough, each of these dates happened on one of God's feasts, the Feast of Tabernacles and Pentecost to be exact. All in all, there are 7 significant signs pointing to Christ's real birth that are either circumstantial coincidences or divine design. Watch the video and you decide. Can we truly know when Christ was born? Hi, I'm JD, and thanks for watching the Godly Rebels channel. First of all, if you are interested in more details on this subject, I already made a feature-length documentary last year that gave a lot more information and explains my findings in much more detail. If after watching this video you still have questions, I encourage you to watch my other video because you may find the answers. For now, I hope you enjoy this shorter video that shares how I came upon these 7 clues declaring Christ's birth and conception. The question plagued me for decades. When was Jesus really born? I knew December 25th was the wrong date because that was originally and still is the practice of Saturnalia, which is a pagan observation of the winter solstice where they worship the sun, the S-U-N. I knew God wouldn't want to share his son's birth with other false gods. It had to be a different date. But which one? My journey began when I was first studying the calendar in the Bible, trying to decipher its logistics and rules for about a year and a half. I had asked God for a sign to show me if I was on the right track or not. He actually gave me 7. But I digress. Part of the calendar included the Feast of God, and there are 7. You might have heard of some of them: Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Shavuot or Pentecost in the Greek, the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and finally, the Feast of Tabernacles. These special feasts are considered appointed times. In other words, they are holy days set apart for specific purposes. One might even say that holidays are a pagan counterfeit to God's holy days. If there were ever an ideal date for Christ's birth, it had to be one of those. My first task was to look in the Bible at Jesus' birth to see if there were any clues about when it happened. Luke 1:26 was the closest thing I saw to an actual date. This verse said the angel Gabriel visited Mary in the 6th month. I already knew it wasn't referring to June in the Gregorian calendar, but rather the 6th month of the Hebrew lunar year, or the Hebrew lunar calendar. That was certainly interesting, but wasn't too specific. I put a pin in that for now, hoping I would return to it later. Next, I wanted to see if anyone else had taken any guesses as to when the Messiah's true date of birth really was. After searching for several days, I came across one contender, Dr. Michael Heiser. To be honest, there were a few other theories and speculations, but none as good as Dr. Heiser's. Dr. Heiser claimed he found the famous Revelation 12 sign during the date of September 11th, 3 BC. The Revelation 12 sign gets its names for obvious reasons. It is found in the New Testament book of Revelation in chapter 12. I will read the first 2 verses now. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then, being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. I was shocked. A well-known biblical scholar had found the Revelation 12 sign and claimed it happened when Jesus was born. Was my search over already? Could it be that easy? I had to be certain. I studied those 2 verses and compared them to the sign in the stars, but the more I studied, the more inconsistencies I found. It appeared the woman only had a garland of 10 stars on her head. There were 9 for the constellation Leo, and Jupiter counted as the 10th, being a wandering star. And was the woman clothed with the sun? The sun was at her waist, so one might argue the sun was in her womb, ready to give birth. But to be clothed with the sun seemed a bit of a stretch. Lastly, the moon was not under her feet either. Dr. Heiser also claimed his date was the Jewish New Year, or Rosh Hashanah, while according to my studies on the calendar, it was 1 month too soon. Maybe I was still wrong about calendar calculations, but we'll see about that. Truthfully, now that I had looked at the sign more closely, none of the 3 criteria made the cut, nor was the timing significant. Surprisingly, I was ecstatic. This meant the search continued. But where to go from here? Most scholars agree that Jesus had to be born sometime between 4 BC and 1 AD. The entire labeling of BC and AD centered around Christ's birth, after all. Before Christ and Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. While I do believe Dr. Heiser was incorrect on his dating, I do believe he was onto something about the Revelation 12 sign. It has long been debated whether the woman in chapter 12 was referring to Mary or Israel. And I think, why not both? It was still the best place I could imagine to finally start my own search. If the constellation Virgo represented the woman in chapter 12, it shouldn't take too much time to look at the other years. The fact is, the sun only appears in Virgo sometime in autumn, usually September or October. Now, I just needed to look at the other years Dr. Heiser didn't look at. I started by going further back, 4 BC, 5 BC, 6 BC, 7 BC, nothing, not even close. Time to go the other direction. 2 BC. I found Virgo. I clicked forward until the sun was in the constellation. Then I waited for the moon. Here it comes. The moon crossed over the sun, which represents a new month, and made its way down to the woman's feet. Pause. Full stop. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Had I found the real Revelation 12 sign? Let's take a closer look and see if this timing matches the description of Revelation 12 verses 1 and 2. Alright, the 9 stars of the constellation Leo are a given. But now, we also have 3 planets that sit above the brow level of the woman: Venus, Jupiter, and Mars. That makes a diadem of 12 stars. Check. Next, is the woman clothed with the sun? Well, the sun is at her shoulder. The interesting thing about clothing, especially robes that they wore back then, is that they would drape down from the shoulders, and the shoulders support whatever clothing they were wearing. Well, that's another check. Lastly, the moon. The moon is literally at or below the woman's feet, just like the verse says. Check, check, and check. I couldn't believe it. I now had a Bible verse and a heavenly sign that worked well together. And once I found this date on the biblical calendar, a third sign was added. It was Pentecost, or Shavuot in Hebrew. Christ was born on Pentecost. Of course, I had to go back to the beginning of the year, find out when Passover was and first fruits, but then I counted all the way to Pentecost, and it came exactly to this date. Incredible! What's amazing to me is if Dr. Michael Heiser had only looked 1 year after his date, he would have found a much better suitor for the Revelation 12 sign. So why did God allow me to discover this sign and not him? Perhaps it was because I wasn't only trying to find Jesus' birth, but more so trying to prove the biblical calendar. But how could I prove the calendar with just one date? I needed another date to compare the two. Well, I believed I already had the date of birth, so why not try to figure out the date of conception? I guess I would start with the obvious. Rewind the clock back 9 months. By those calculations, I was close to the 7th biblical month. I already knew from studying the calendar there were 3 fall festivals, and the closest one was the Feast of Tabernacles. It takes place from the 15th day to the 21st day in the 7th month, and often includes the 22nd day as well. That was incredible. Tabernacles literally means to dwell with. Could it be that Jesus tabernacled among men during the Feast of Tabernacles? To be more sure, I counted how many weeks there were between Tabernacles and Pentecost. 44. And that was including adding a 13th month at the end of the year. That was totally within the realm of possibility, considering 2,000 years ago, they had no hospitals. All births had to go full term. 44 weeks was a healthy average. Conception during a feast and birth during a feast? What were the odds? It had to be true. Even though I didn't have a heavenly sign for the date of conception, that was good enough for me. And for a few days, I forgot about it. But God wanted me to keep searching. He said, "There's more." More? How? I didn't even know what to look for or where. There were 8 days during Tabernacles, and the night sky is pretty big. It felt like looking for a needle in a haystack. But after regaining my composure, I realized the haystack was only 8 days and not a whole month. That is, if I was right. So I started on the 15th day of the 7th month and started searching for a sign. Any sign. I looked for conjunctions. I searched for planets within certain constellations. Heck, I looked for the stars that spelled out conception. I was not going to discount anything because anything was possible. The 15th went by. Nothing. The 16th, still no sign. 17th, nope. 18th, I'm halfway there. 19th, was I searching in the wrong area? 20th, come on God, where's the sign? 21st was the last official day of Tabernacles. Surely that had to be something on that date. Nope, not that I could tell. Well, the 22nd was still grouped in with Tabernacles as a day of rest. So maybe it took place on the 8th day of the festival. After searching a little more, that's when I found something. I didn't know what it was, but I found something. The moon was only a waning gibbous, but it came into conjunction with the planet Jupiter. Jupiter is known as the king planet because it is the largest in our solar system. I thought, Jesus is king. Maybe that's significant. I zoomed out a little bit to get a bigger picture. The conjunction of Jupiter and the moon was happening in the constellation Leo. Leo is a lion. Christ is a Lion of Judah. Maybe I was onto something. Nothing made sense, and the picture was still out of focus. I needed a Bible verse to make everything more clear. I started looking at as many messianic prophecies as I could find. Isaiah 7, verse 14. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. That's nice, but not too specific. Matthew 5:2 says Messiah was born in Bethlehem. That's good too, but I was looking for the conception and not the birth, and a date, not location. I remembered another prophecy of Balaam found in Numbers 24, verse 17. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and batter the brow of Moab, and destroy all the sons of tumult. Jesus was definitely the star to come out of Jacob. I was getting closer, but that still was not the right verse. Finally, I found a very obscure verse in Genesis. Genesis 49, verses 9 and 10 says this: Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the people. Shiloh means peace, and Christ is the Prince of Peace. It also talks about Shiloh coming, so perhaps that means Jesus coming to earth. I had to look deeper into this verse. I started to dissect this verse into key phrases and nouns and compared it to what I saw in the heavens. Firstly, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. Jupiter was the king planet, and kings hold a scepter. Verse 9 said Judah was like a lion. I zoomed out again. Jupiter, the king, was inside of Leo, or Judah. Gadzooks! What else could there be? The next phrase was, nor a lawgiver from between his feet. After a little more research, I discovered the moon was essentially the lawgiver of the heavens, helping keep track of time. The moon was not only in Leo, but it was between the feet of Leo. This was incredible. This had to be the heavenly sign for Christ's conception. But wait, there was still another phrase. Until Shiloh comes. That also made me think about the phrase at the beginning of the verse. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. Could it be that Jupiter, the scepter, would not depart from Judah, the constellation Leo, until Shiloh came? In other words, would Jupiter stay within Leo until the birth of Christ? This would be the most simple part of the test. All I had to do was click forward day by day and watch Jupiter as it moved across the starry background. Let's begin. For a few months, Jupiter kept moving forward, but then it began to slow down. Soon it stopped completely. I couldn't believe what happened next. It went backwards. Jupiter kept moving backwards toward the head of the lion. Oh no! It was going to leave the constellation. But then it happened again. It slowed down and reversed its direction. It started heading toward the tail again. I found out this was called retrograde motion. So Jupiter kept moving toward the tail of Leo until it came to the edge of the constellation. The exact lines of the constellation were only a guess, but it seemed to be at or just outside the line. I stopped changing the time and looked at the date. It was the same date as the birth of Christ. I zoomed out once more and I saw the Revelation 12 sign, plain as day, or rather plain as night. I couldn't believe it. The scepter never departed from Judah until Shiloh came. I paused for a moment and remembered when Gabriel visited Mary and said she would bear a son. That happened sometime during the 6th month. Well, Tabernacles was during the 7th month. Now that verse fit. In my other video, I talk about how important that verse is, Luke 1:26, and how it establishes a concrete timeline. So if you're interested, watch that video too. So Luke 1:26 was the first sign that God gave me to show me the concrete timeline. But of course, there were 6 more. The next 3 were the Bible verse, the sign in the heavens, and the feast day or appointed time for the moment of conception. That's Genesis 49, the sign that we just saw of Jupiter inside of Leo, and it happened on a feast day, Tabernacles. And of course, there was a Bible verse, Revelation 12, the sign in the heavens, Revelation 12, the woman with the sun and the 12 stars and the moon at her feet, and happening on a feast of the Lord, Pentecost. 7 signs in total confirming the timing of the conception and the birth of Christ. God had outdone himself is the understatement of the millennium. These dates had to be it. They were definitely divine design. But of course, God planned it all out from the beginning. The beginning. Let's go back to the beginning of this journey. The quest to study the biblical calendar was confirmed by finding the date of Christ's birth. The Gregorian date of September the 3rd, 2 BC, didn't have any significance, but Pentecost on the Hebrew calendar certainly did. God the Father gave the law at Mount Sinai during Pentecost, according to Exodus chapters 19 through 32. We also know from Acts chapter 2 that the Holy Spirit was given during Pentecost. Now, it would appear God the Son, the Word made flesh, as stated in John 1:14, was also given at Pentecost. So much could be celebrated and observed on this very holy day of Shavuot, the Festival of Weeks, more commonly known as Pentecost. Adding the birth of Christ to this day's celebrations would be so spectacular and significant. Or perhaps we could celebrate Christ's conception during the Feast of Tabernacles. Life begins at conception after all. This moment is when Jesus emptied himself of the form and equality of God and put on the likeness of man in humility, which is described in Philippians chapter 2. The word tabernacle itself means to dwell with, and that is certainly what Jesus did on the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles. This too would be an awesome and wonderful day to celebrate God's dwelling with men. He is Emmanuel, God with us. If you truly want to celebrate the birth of Jesus, please do it on one of these appointed times, God's appointed times. He would be so much more pleased with that than if you kept on celebrating his son when the pagans have celebrated their unconquered son, Sol Invictus, for thousands of years, even before Christ's birth. God is a jealous God and does not want to share his son or his feast with anything resembling paganism. Search your heart this winter season and ask yourself what God would be pleased with. Pray and ask God how he would want to be worshiped and remembered. On a day filled with pagan origins and worldly traditions, or on a day appointed by God and filled with biblical purpose. Consider these words of wisdom. Proverbs 13:20. Walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. Joshua 24:15. Choose for yourself today whom you will serve. I hope this has been a blessing for everyone watching, and I hope you take it to heart. Really ask yourself and pray how God wants to be worshiped and remembered. Well, finally, please comment your thoughts down below. If you learned something, share it with a friend so they can learn it too. And as always, put on the full armor of God every day. God bless.